Here he is. So Dan is here. He is our games representative in this section. Hi Dan. Hello. So we are doing an interview. So Dan, do you want to start by telling us about you? Who are you? What do you do in the games industry? And yeah, give us a quick overview.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Oh God, in 15 minutes, got to be real super quick with this. So basically, I work in the video games industry. I have a sorted career, across all kinds of comms roles, and comms is basically a mixture of PR, social media management, community management, as well as various kind of jobs within that. I'm probably most well known for my work in the video games publisher Square Enix and Warner Bros. Games. But again, I've worn a lot of hats during my career. But that's basically me in a nutshell.
Amazing. And okay, so obviously we've got to go back to school briefly because everyone watching is at school at the
Yeah.
moment or at university. And so, what were you like when you were their age? And did you know that you were going to go into something like this?
Oh no, I had absolutely no idea. So in school, I had no idea what I wanted to do in my future career. Uh, as I think a lot of people find, like when you're in school, it's really hard to figure that out. It's really hard to know what you want to do. Um, and at the time when I was in school, I thought the best thing to do was to do a career or look for a career that had like I guess future employment prospects. So the school I went to was quite I guess a traditional academic kind of school. So I was kind of pushed, or I kind of thought the best kind of avenue would be through science actually. So I studied a lot of the sciences throughout school. And then I went to university to study molecular biology, graduated with that, which is, as you can imagine, has nothing to do with what I do in my career. Uh, but that's part of life, right? That's just what happens. You kind of find your way out. Because when you're in school, or at least when I was in school as well, like the person I was back then, hugely different to who I am now, even different to the person I was a couple of years ago. So a lot of my time, in school, in university, with also figuring out myself and figuring out what I wanted to do. And the way I got into the games industry was, to be honest, a lot of luck, but also a lot of passion because I've played video games my entire life. Love games, always wanted to be part of the industry, but never really thought I could be. So when I graduated, I didn't want to go into the science field. So with a bunch of friends at the time, I just started a video games podcast and a blog. We just blogged about games because that was what we were into. I guess these days, the equivalent would be like a TikTok channel or a YouTube channel. So through that, I was very, very lucky to build up some connections, network a bit, and then through that, it was literally through a tweet for a PR agency who we'd met through doing video game stuff. They tweeted that they were looking for an assistant publicist role in their games team, which was an entry level job. And I literally just applied, knew I could do it, and that was how I got in.
Oh, I love that. I mean, there's so many things to kind of focus on there. One is that you didn't wait for permission to, I guess get experience in the games industry. You started a podcast with your friends. Like, that's amazing, and a blog. So I think, everyone watching who wants to follow that kind of model, I'm sure you can do it. I mean, you just need to, I guess, have access to the internet. So that's great. And then number two, you really found your first job through a really untraditional platform, Twitter. So I think, think outside the box if you are looking for something, an opportunity. You don't have to just be looking on LinkedIn and Indeed because everyone else is doing that. Look elsewhere. So the best bits and the worst bits of your job. Tell us, I know that you are kind of, you do a lot of bits and pieces in the kind of comms area. What is your favorite? What is your least favorite?
So I'd say my favorite part, this is going to sound really cliched, but I feel very fortunate to be part of video games industry. As I said, I'm a big gamer. I've played games my whole life. So being part of an industry that I love, working on games is huge for me. But also what I've learned throughout my career, things that I really enjoy, which is kind of like partly how I found myself in this career, was the job part that I really like is actually like talking to people and without, because basically comms is kind of making people aware of the games and the products, right, that I'm working on. Um, so in my position, I'm very fortunate, see a lot of behind the scenes stuff and get involved in a lot of these things that for me as a gamer is really huge, but also the job part that I really enjoy is actually that, just talking to other people about things that I love and things that, it's almost like convincing people like, oh, this is why you should pay attention because I think it's cool. Therefore, I think you should think it's cool, which is a huge part of comms in general. The worst part of my job in talking about comms generally, this is a little bit more, I guess, more specific, like, to do with like social media management and community management. But again, factors into all comms is that it's a very online job, if you will. And the online world, especially anyone who follows games news, knows can be very unforgiving. People can be very mean, let's say, on the internet, and you are on the front lines of that. So you're exposed to a lot of harsh language, let's just say, that takes a lot of fortitude and a lot of kind of like resilience to get through it sometimes. Again, it's got really high highs because again, they'll be your biggest cheerleaders, but also your worst critics. So it's taking the high highs with the low lows.
Yeah, and that is a really important point because I think there is, I'm sure a lot of people watching who will be like, oh, I would love to do something like that. I spend a lot of time on social media as it is very different when you're kind of, I guess, yeah, doing it all day, every day. And, potentially you could be in the firing line for a lot of that stuff. And I think that is something definitely to bear in mind. It must be hard.
Yeah, especially like when you're like the voice of a brand, because people often forget that there are actually real people behind these channels and these brands, so they'll just spout out, whatever,
Yeah.
not thinking like, yeah, the human behind it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, and I think it is also worth pointing out that a lot of people will think that, games is just one job, which is gamer or like games creator. And so it probably does come across to a lot of people like it might be quite an isolated job, a lonely job, but your role is literally, like you said, talking to people, getting out there, getting the message out there. Are there other areas of the games business that you think would really disrupt that kind of initial perception of it's a very lonely industry?
Yeah, I definitely would. Even the things that you would assume were kind of like, yeah, more lonely are not. A lot of this is the mystique on like on how games are made and how they're actually released, which is it's very, very complicated, to be honest. So it's got a lot of kind of layers, which is why a lot of people kind of misunderstand what really goes into it. But even jobs where you think are more traditionally lonely or you're on your own, like let's say like a programmer, um, games are not made in the same way of as other mediums where everything's kind of like, I mean, heavily simplifying things. Like in if you're making a TV show or a film, you shoot a scene, you edit it together. There's processes. Obviously, the things not everything's shot in sequence and that kind of thing. But in games, it's a lot more extrapolated than that. There's there's a saying the again heavily generalization, but there's a saying like you never see a game as it's going to come out until like right at the end of when its development cycle because every part is made in basically all at the same time in different kind of functions. So you need a communication skills are key because you will be working with so many different people, even if you are thinking doing one of these kind of more traditionally like lonely roles, that's like the example of a programmer, you might be programming for a very specific function, a thing to do with this game. Let's say the animation of one of the characters. But then you need to be talking to like the narrative team to know what that character is really going to be doing throughout the game. So you need to know like kind of their movements. You need to talk about mechanics on if it's like an action game, what movements are they going to be climbing? Are they going to be fighting with their fists or a sword or something, right? So it's like you need to be very collaborative to understand how your role fits in with the bigger picture. And that's just with making games. When you're coming to releasing games, like naturally, in my role in comms, I need to know what the game is and what the key selling points, if you will, are, or the unique things about it, so I can actually tell people about it, right? So I need to talk to people to figure that out. Then you've got people in marketing and brand that need to understand the game again to kind of form this picture. So it's very, very highly collaborative. There's a lot of um, every role, I would say, needs some degree of like working with other people. Obviously, depending on the time and the scale, that will shift. But but that is not to say that you can't work independently as well. There's definitely room for that, but it's not yet as the stereotype, as if you will, doesn't really exist anymore.
Absolutely. And I think, like you were saying, there's the production and then there's the stuff that happens after the production as well. And that's something that people forget often. And obviously, we are kind of technically in the film and TV section as well. You have just mentioned film and TV when you were chatting. They are very closely linked, aren't they? And they do kind of share a lot of the same workforces, skills. It's a similar process in the way that you have the stuff leading up to the release, the actual creation of that, and then you have this big thing about the release. So talk a bit about how, I guess, your kind of experience of integrating games into film and TV briefly while we have a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So a lot of the skills are very cross-functional, as we call them. So they're very, you can apply them to either kind of industries or all kind of industries that. I mean, the obvious things when you think about production, animation and games go hand in hand, right? That's an obvious link because of the nature of those mediums. But there's other skills that you probably might not think that will be useful in like kind of all parts of um, both industries. Now, again, there's very hyper specific things that will be games only, things like programming.
Yeah.
But there are so many other roles that kind of touch on every kind of point. And that's whether you're making the thing or you are helping release the thing. So a good example would be a writer, right? So a writer, you think, oh, you're going to be writing the story, right? That would be the same, like whether it would be in film, TV, or games. But then you break that down, that could be like script writing, that could be um, different parts of the writing process, right? So if in film and TV, sometimes you'll be editing between like certain parts of the dialogue while the things are being shot on the fly or in pre-production. But then in games, you also again you could be writing dialogue, you could be writing the whole narrative structure. Those are very skills that kind of overlap. Um, and then of course in games it goes even further because you've got if that example of dialogue, you've got like main character dialogue, which stuff cutscenes that kind of push a story forward. But then you've also got bits of like all the NPCs that kind of just say one line. Somebody has to write what they're all going to say. And then now your writing skills in a publishing sense can be used for copywriting. So if you've ever read a description on Netflix on, what this TV show or film is, that's somebody, a copywriter who's written that. My role in comms is a lot of writing. It's a lot of, condensing information really quickly to post either on social media or to tell a journalist or a content creator or a YouTuber about something and how you communicate. All of that is under a very umbrella of writing. And there's so many different other examples of that, but I get that gives you a little insight into how one skill can be used in all of the industries.
No, that's a fantastic summary of it. And I think, that will have broadened a lot of people's horizons there, I think. Unfortunately, that is all that we've got time for. And we have Laura from ITV here to talk about ITV Academy, which is very exciting. So, Dana, I'm going to have to kick you off. But it has been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much. I'm glad we put you into the film and TV section because that was a great way to end on it.